There are a significant number of emerging attacks within the ICS space. Everybody's heard of Stuxnet. There have been more recent examples of various electrical and pipeline system attacks in various parts of the world. But I'll call your attention to this graph here. This is produced by ICS from a study they did a few years ago. And they were looking at, okay, of all the critical infrastructure sectors, where are the cyber incidents and or attacks targeting? And you can see that the energy sector has been the big victim here with 53% of the attacks, as opposed to manufacturing, communications, transportation, that sort of thing. So security continues to be a challenge. As we start blending IT and OT, there are certain things that you can do on the IT side that you can't do on the operational technology side. Let's take a simple case in point of patching the operating system. So there are control systems that run on Windows XP. Now, one, you're thinking, well, that thing's been end of life for a while now. Why are people still using Windows XP? Because they can't migrate it off of the OT block. It's being used to control a critical process. They can't replace it. They can't upgrade it without potentially introducing all sorts of problems with these things. And so they're kind of stuck with it. It's like, okay, well, I have a bunch of critical security patches. Can I push those patches to my Windows XP box? Wait a minute, you probably don't want to do that, because what happens to the operating system when I push patches? Is it going to want to be rebooted? Probably, which means now my process control system's going down for 5 minutes while we reboot it, and I can't have that. All sorts of things that we take for granted on the traditional security side, you can't do with ICS systems, just because of the inherent expectation that the operational technology, the production network, has to be up. It has to be up and running all the time. And because of that real-time nature of it, we can't affect that in any way. And there's another security challenge here where you have business requirements that say, okay, we are going to do real-time billing of electricity usage. Well, that's great, but what that means is I now have to connect my electricity usage measurement systems, which are typically control systems, with my billing system. Now, I'll give you one guess where the billing system typically resides. It's not on the OT side, it's on the IT side, on the business operations side of the house. So now I've got a connection between my control system network, my OT side, and my IT, IT business networks. Why is that a problem? Well, we've gone out and talked to a couple critical infrastructure providers in the past, and as we go through and do security risk assessments, the first question we always ask is, what are the connections between IT and OT? And usually, before we even ask that question, the providers are very quick to jump on us and say, before you ask, there's no connection between IT and OT. And everybody kind of chuckles at that. Because once you start digging into this, you'll usually find some type of connection between the two networks. Possibly one they didn't know about that was there. Somebody put in as a backdoor. Who knows? All sorts of funny stuff happens there. But it's these connections between the IT and the OT network that produces all of these challenges. Because it gets a little bit worse than that when you start considering that there are no patches on the OT side of the house. Again, I can't patch that Windows XP box that's been running the HVAC system for 10 years. If I do, it'll break. Well, so now I've got a connection between the internet on the business side of the house and our SCADA network, our ICS network on the production side, and I've got all these terminals that are 10 years old with no patches on it. And you wonder why we have problems. Now, most critical infrastructure operators are very good at monitoring that connection because they recognize the fact that there's a problem there and that it is such a great risk. There isn't a whole lot of guidance out there for securing ICS and SCADA systems compared to what you find in traditional security. But there are various places you can go to get information on security and configuration. Get something from your vendor. Most companies don't build the equipment that they use. Go to your vendor. Your vendor will have specific instructions on how to patch that system, how to scan that system for vulnerabilities, and those types of things. NIST Special Publication 800-82 specifically is a guide to ICS security. There's a lot out there from Department of Energy on energy sector equipment. There usually will be some sector-specific mandates or industry best practices that you can refer to. And the ICS CERT, managed by DHS, also puts out security-related information as well. Just recognize the fact that, if you have an OT system that you're responsible for security on, you cannot directly apply what you would do on the traditional security side of the house to the operational technology side of the house. There have been some very well documented cases of, I'm a security administrator, I'm going to go run Nmap on my control system network just to see what's out there. And just by virtue of running Nmap, is managed to crash various control system components. So it's generally not a good thing to do. But there are ways to translate between the two. If you know what to do on the security side, the IT, traditional IT security side, you can take that, interpret it in certain ways, and apply it, at least the basic knowledge of it on the OT side. So here's some practices if you're responsible for an OT network. Look for all the connections to the OT network. Again, your biggest risk is where your OT network crosses with your IT network. So first and foremost, identify all the connections to the OT network, where they're coming from. If you find that you don't need those, disconnect them. Turn off those unnecessary connections. The one that you absolutely have to have, harden them, put monitoring on them. Anything you can do with transaction signatures, cryptographic controls on both sides for authentication. Make sure that those connections are legitimate and are what they should be. If you can, segment the control systems, the IT side of the house and the OT side of the house, and absolutely under no circumstances connect a control system to the internet unless you absolutely have to do it. There are some cases where you are required to do this. You've got to do it for operational reasons. Just be cognizant that that's there and that it's a big risk. Any type of security features that your device or system vendor makes available to you, implement it, and please change the default passwords on whatever device they send you. That's probably the one biggest issue right now is people using default passwords on devices. There are lists out there on the internet of, you just do a search for, vendor and device type, and up will pop a list of all the default passwords that are there. And so that's allowing attackers to get in. And then have some type of intrusion detection or 24/7 monitoring and response capabilities. You're just like traditional IT, don't make the assumption that you're going to keep everybody out. So how do you mitigate what they can do once they get into your network? Security measures, again, make sure that you have authentication on both sides of, if you're using wireless, that you authenticate both devices so that somebody can't come in and do a man in the middle or impersonate either the end device or the server itself. If you have the ability to do multi-factor authentication, do it. It's not always possible. And then from a procedural process standpoint, make sure you understand the security roles and responsibilities. And I think this is the biggest challenge I've seen on companies that we've worked with that have had both an IT and an OT side of the house. The two not necessarily bump heads, but they don't work together. And so even though there are shared connections between the two, there's a distinct chop right between the two. And they don't interact, they don't talk to each other. And that causes problems when you have attacks that cascade from one side to the other. So make sure you clearly identify what those security roles and responsibilities are. If you can do technical audits of your systems regularly, do so. Physical access, physical security of all these operating sites, do that as well. And of course, system backups and disaster recovery plans, the same types of things that you would do on the traditional security side of the house, from a backup and a recovery perspective, apply those principles on the OT side.